So the bombs were hurling toward the target. They had been released. And when those things impacted, it was not going to be a good day for the Taliban leaders on the receiving end of it. Everything was going just as planned. We were in the Tactical Operations Center watching and monitoring the impact of these bombs, which was then going to be followed after the objective was prepared by, what we call fires. Then there was going to be an assault that would follow. And this was in the mid-2000s. And my commander at this point, as the bombs are moving towards the target, turns to me and he says, "Scotty, what are we doing about information operations here? What's the narrative?" We're seconds from impact, right? And that's when we ask ourselves the question, right? As rotors are spinning, what are we doing about the story? Well, the reality is we had a, token response that was canned and had been put out there, and it worked out all right. But more often than not, that question was asked in the war in Afghanistan. It's still done that way today. It's an afterthought. And the violent extremists use that absence of narrative or story, and they exploit it for their own ends. They may illuminate that there was collateral damage on the target or that innocent civilians were killed, and they will hijack the operation and put their own narrative, which they've prepared quite well, and they don't need a 48-hour approval process like we have. They put that story out quick and on Instagram and Snapchat, and guess what? It's out there, and the narrative wins. Whoever puts the most compelling narrative out first wins in a war of ideas or in business. And that's really my theme for this week, lead with story. It's the fourth element of the Game Changers methodology that's in the book, the original Game Changers, and most recently, the new Game Changers, the second edition, the Citizens Edition, which was really written for you. It was written for you because we have to change the game if we're going to defeat violent extremists. This is the longest war in our nation's history, 16 years, and nothing's changed really, right? And so these observations that I made in about 4.5 years of being inside the combat zone and talking to thousands of relevant experts are contained in this book. And my belief is that at this point, the only way we're going to change the game and actually develop a strategy that has a chance of winning is you. Citizens like you who demand that our policymakers, our politicians, and even our senior military leaders listen to the folks who are working the fight and who have captured these lessons in a compelling way. And so each month this week in December, I've been putting a lesson in there, and this one is lead with story. This is the final game-changing principle, but it's absolutely essential. You can have all of the tactical proficiency in the world, all of the big bombs, but just like ISIS says in their video, no respite, you drop bombs on us that cost $250,000 and we kill you with 50-cent bullets shot by our surrogates, right? That's a more compelling story. And we've got to start paying attention to the power of story. Listen, our brains are wired for story. Now, I'm not just talking about the fight against ISIS or Al-Qaeda. I'm talking about everyday life. I'm talking about if you're creating a movement as a leader, whether you're a small business owner, a nonprofit founder, or a manager at work, if you are moving people to action, if you want people to take action in this world, in a trust-depleted environment, which is what we live in now, you got to lead with story, right? Story is the oldest, most powerful form of communication in the world. The brain is wired for story. We find meaning and memory in story, and we're the most meaning-seeking creatures on the planet. We act on meaning. Stories convey that. Stories plant memories in our brain. They thread the needle of short-term working and go into long-term memory. That's why you remember so vividly the stories of your grandparents. So if you are moving in a certain direction with your company, right, we have to know what that vision is and tell us a story that will get us there. Now, a couple other things about story, right? Whether we're fighting ISIS or whether we are trying to grow our sales, the story has to land on people's hearts. It has to have emotion. It has to touch them emotionally, which is not hard. We're all natural storytellers, right? The first thing I would encourage you to do, right? Is be the storyteller in chief of your organization. If you are a leader, embrace the reality that story is a huge part of it. Learn to understand the dynamics of story, right? Read the chapter in this book. It's chapter 10, Lead with Story. Read Story Brand. It's a great book. Read The Storyteller's Secret, right? Go to our website, rooftopleadership.com. There's all kinds of resources there that you can learn about story. But recognize that you are the storyteller in chief and embrace that reality, right? Because without story, your vision cannot be realized. And if you outsource story to somebody else, or you think that it doesn't matter, you are missing the point and you are on the march of the dinosaurs. You're not going to be relevant as a leader, right? So the first thing I'm asking you to do is to embrace your role as storyteller in chief. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is really learn the components of story. In particular, I'd love you to see you develop your own backstory, right? Develop your own backstory for how you let us know who you are, right? And the backstory is really pretty simple. Think of a moment in your life, an origin story, if you will, that something happened that really was a major shift for you. It was a catalyst moment, a pivotal moment in your life that shifted you in another direction. Maybe it was the day your parents divorced, maybe you changed schools, maybe you lost your job, but everything you knew about the world changed, right? For me, it was when a Green Beret walked into the soda shop when I was 14 years old. And then I want you to talk to about the struggle that ensued, the journey, the hero's journey that you went on to overcome that. Talk about how you overcame it. Talk about the struggle and what it was like, because that's when we find you relatable. And then finally, talk about the resolution. What did you learn? How did you change? What did it show you about the world? Because if you can do that, man, I'm telling you, we now have a sense of you, and we will trust you. It permeates gaps, it closes gaps, ethnicity, religion. So be the storyteller in chief, develop your origin story. And again, rooftopleadership.com, we can help you do that. And then finally, once you've done that, I want you to listen to the stories of others. Position yourself as a great listener. Ask open-ended questions that let people tell you their story. See, with storytelling, most people think they have to do all the talking. I will tell you the most powerful stories in the world are not the ones you tell, they're the ones you ask to hear, right? So if you want to lead with story, if you want to change the game, be the storyteller in chief. Develop your own hero's journey or origin story. And listen more than you talk. Ask to hear powerful stories and recycle them back into the conversation. Huge validation, makes you relevant, and people will give you the story that you need to hear. Until next time, keep changing the game, and I'll see you on the rooftop.